Welcome to the long term. I'm Ty King, and this podcast we're talking about recovery in so many different areas. We've covered a lot of different areas along the way that have been very educational. Everybody's story has been so different. Right now September is Recovery Month, and I think the most important way that we can learn about recovery is by hearing from the people that have experience in it, and that comes from people who have actually lived through the process of going through recovery, finding out what resources were available to them, what were some of the roadblocks, what worked for them, because I mean everybody's story is a little bit different. There is no cure all for just recovery, period. And hopefully we'll get into that today. I'm sure we will. And anyways, I just wanted to get into this interview with somebody I've known for a while, through this recovery circle. When you're in this world, which is its own world, and you kind of have to learn your way around it and navigate it, even though it is so embracing, you'll see certain faces that circulate through the different circles every time you go to an events, or if you have a conversation about people that are making a real, a stand in recovery. Certain people's names will come up, and Mary Beth is definitely one of those names and faces that you see a lot in recovery. Not just even in Arkansas, like you've been doing a lot of traveling across the U.S.
Lots.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and so people know you, coast to coast. How does that
Yeah.
feel that you're a celebrity now?
I'm not a celebrity type, but it's an amazing feeling, right? It's like
Yeah.
never in my wildest dreams, if you would have told me whenever I got clean a little over 8 years ago that this would be my life today, and I would get to travel all over the United States, talking about recovery and reentry and being the guiding light for so many different people, I would have told you were crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't in my, that wasn't in my cards. And so to say that I'm blessed is really just an understatement.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is it Marybeth Hill?
Yeah.
I don't know why I always get your last name wrong.
Because it
Did you ever
because
change it?
no, it's because I have a very white person name and a
Yeah.
brown. You know what I mean? And so when you
Right.
look at me, my name and my appearance
Yeah.
don't match, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's something else that's I guess it sticks out about you is, of course, I mean, obviously you're not the typical person that we think of that's in recovery, especially if you're in Arkansas, right?
That's right.
We've had lots of conversations about that. We're
Yes.
talking about how representation, if representation matters across all films and forts and boards, it absolutely matters in something where it's like, here's a life-changing event, recovery. You know what I mean? Getting your life back on track. And so we need to see ourselves up on the stage talking about how you can do it as well, because that's
Absolutely.
me, right? And I don't think that what we have right now represents the majority. I mean, like it doesn't represent the population of Arkansas at least, but also the U.S.
But that's a real statement. We travel all across the United States, and we have a lot of representation from, especially in the recovery world,
Yeah,
from white males.
sure.
And I think a lot of that stems from a lot of stigma, and a lot of different ethnicities and cultures. There's a lot of stigma that surrounds, a life that's not savory. So let's be realistic. Like whenever I found recovery, my mom was like, stop talking about that on social media. That don't talk about that, or like when
Yeah,
I went to prison and I came home and she was like, stop. And but I, after a while, like me really explaining it to her, like this is so important, not just for people of another ethnicity, but for women in general.
yeah,
Like to say, hey, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but those mistakes no longer define who I am as a woman.
yeah,
And so that has been literally my motto since I got clean is like, I will always recover out loud. You hear this in the recovery community a lot that we recover out loud in hopes that the next addict doesn't die in silence.
yeah,
Like if I can be that voice for that underserved population, right? And they can see that, we don't have to live in the stigma because of, these cultural beliefs and backgrounds that we come from, that maybe that they can hopefully, find their way to, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your journey there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you never get to do that, right?
I do it all the time. And I promise, like, I will never get tired of, telling the world my story.
Mhm.
I'll never get tired of it because literally, like, I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason. Now, with that context, I put myself through a lot of things, that I probably didn't have to do, right? But all of those events in my life have literally led me to where I am today. And so I can't look at my past and be upset about it. Like I've done a lot of work on myself to where I can get to that place to be able to tell my story because it's so important, that people know why these things happen, right? Like why I turned to drugs and alcohol. It was so important for me to find that out. Like why what happened in my life that made me, turn out the way that I did? And so whenever I was really able to dig deep into those things and like start figuring out like the childhood trauma, which I thought my whole life was normal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you don't when you're a kid, you don't know this terminology, trauma and stuff like that.
Mhm.
That tells you that you're different. And so I thought that this was just everyday life. I thought everybody's lives were this chaotic and, unmanageable, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Yeah, very abusive household I grew up in. Dad is an alcoholic. If there wasn't money for anything else, there was always money for alcohol. Not literally. And I don't know, like yeah, we're right. Like you're in that, and you realize that probably not everyone lives the same way you do. Like you've seen movies and TV
Right.
shows, you've seen what a quote unquote normal family looks like.
That's right.
Yeah. And then what your reality is and what you live in, you're like, well, I guess this is just my reality, and this is what I have to live in. I remember sitting in my living room whenever I got my it was like a health book in like elementary school.
Yeah.
You triggered this memory. Uh and sitting in the living room, and like my mom was there, and I was like, here's a whole thing about alcoholism and why we shouldn't drink it. And I was like, my dad was on the front porch, like, and the walls were thin enough where he could have heard me. So I just read the whole paragraphs out loud, you know what I mean? Hoping like, I hope this sinks in, because like I'm so tired of like hearing that can crack open in the morning and knowing I got 20 minutes of peace before everything's about to break loose.
But it's crazy the ties that that is not my story, right? Like my parents were so far, they were not in any way, shape, or form any kind of addicts. Like the worst that they did was smoke cigarettes. But trauma looks like, what you just talked about. Trauma looks so different in so many different households. I came from a mother who, if you know anything, so I'm half Filipino. And so my mom is full Filipino. And so Asian culture is very rigid. It's not that loving, nurturing, mother, and that I'm not mad at her for that, right? Like that's just the way that she was raised.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like that, that mom that I could go to that would love on me. And, it was very rigid, very conditional. Like we had to get up, we had to do things the house had to be clean, it was very. And then my dad, who was in the military, and he's also the son of a Southern Baptist preacher,
Oh my gosh.
you know,
Combination. I love that.
right. So, like, you have this rigid Asian culture, you have this rigid Southern Baptist military culture, and we did not emotions were not a thing in my house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they weren't. Either you were happy or you're mad. The sad piece to it was non-existent. My dad had this very strong mentality of like we just suit up, we show up, and we move around. And my mom, because she came from such a life of poverty that, there was no time to be upset or sad about anything. We just had to do whatever we had to do to make it happen so we could live life. And
Right.
so as a kid, I was taught very, very early to shut those emotions out. Like, and then you couple that with they couldn't get along to save their lives. You know what I mean? Like I tell people before I was in second grade, I think I lived like in 7 different states. And it wasn't even really because of the military. Some of those were military moves, but most of that was because my parents couldn't get along longer than a year at a time. And then the next thing I know, we're moving. And so we were already removed because of the military. So then we would move to these different states to each other's respective families' houses. And so I found myself in very early childhood not knowing what a home was.
Yeah.
And how important is that, right? Like you look at that in the retrospective, like even addiction, like, in order for people to recover, one of the things that's a pillar of recovery is having stable living conditions. But think about being a child and not knowing like from the next day to the next, was I going to be in this home
That's right.
or was I going to, move to somewhere else, or like, am I going to be in somebody else's home? And then never feeling like I belonged anywhere. And so that those early childhood memories and those events really shaped who I became, as a pre-adolescent and then into adulthood.
So hopping around from house to house in just different cities, and you ended up in North Little Rock?
No, so I actually ended up in Cabot.
Cabot. Okay.
Let's talk about that for a second. So,
Yeah.
when we finally get here, I'm in second grade and I moved to Cabot. So I'm going to tell you my age here, but it's the early 90s, And so if anybody who knows anything about Cabot, Arkansas in the early 90s, it was not.
I don't know if anybody does, but
Yeah.
unless you live there.
You're
You
talking about
live
a
there or you
little
work.
a little hole in the wall, very racist town.
Yeah.
When I was in school, we had there was two mixed kids and
Yeah.
then, a handful of like mixed Asian kids, maybe.
Mm.
That were there because their parents were stationed at the base and so they would be there for a little while then leave.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in Cabot, dark complected, and then trying to figure out how I belonged there.
Yeah.
So I feel like my whole life I was like always trying to overcompensate. And what do we do whenever we don't know how to deal with emotions, right? Like I masked a lot of my emotions with humor. So that was my thing. Like everything was funny to me. I was like the
Yeah.
class clown. I don't have a report card, one, I don't think in my life that never said I didn't talk too much or that I was just like I just couldn't get it together because I was always trying to like make jokes and make light of everything that was going on in my life because if you're happy, people are less likely to ask you questions about
Right.
what your life looked like, not knowing even as a kid like I was miserable inside. And not only that, we were not in poverty, but we were definitely struggling financially in life. And so you just do whatever you have to do to try to get through, you know? And so that I found myself a lot of my early childhood, like trying to conform to whatever was around me just so I could feel like I belonged,
Yeah.
you know?
That makes sense. Some of the best, the greatest comedians, they all suffered from depression. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so that was their form of whatever, like fighting against it or getting
Yep.
it out. But also, it's hard to address those things when you don't have the tools or you know how
Exactly.
to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, we didn't, what are tools? Mental health was not something that was discussed in the early 90s, neither was
Yeah.
substance use. And then when you come from the background that I came from, especially like with the religious background,
Yeah.
anything that happened in the family, we kind of just swept it under the rug.
Mm.
And not only that, so my grandfather was a chaplain for ADC, and he's the one who created the music ministries in ADC. And so, like in the 70s, I don't know if they do it anymore now, but back in like the 70s and 80s, they used to do like the music ministries, and he's the one who
Okay.
created. So, like, he created this like program, and it was like music, like Christian music, and they would travel from prison to prison, and they would music ministries.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because there was a traveling band.
Hmm.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, so he was one of the founders of that way back when. And
Wow.
so, yeah, so you not only have that.
Not as a prisoner, but as
No,
a
as a
yeah,
chaplain,
chaplain
yeah.
on the outside.
And so you have that, not only do you have that component of being, a Southern Baptist preacher, but he's also a chaplain in
Yeah.
Arkansas Department of Corrections.
Wow.
Yeah, and so then I'm the youngest grandchild out of all of them, and I'm the only brown grandchild, you know what I mean? And I look back at it, I'm not mad at him, like, once again, whenever we look at how we grow up and, like, what we are raised and how we are raised to view things in life, like, he was super racist, and you can only imagine being in the Arkansas Department of Corrections, and plus he was born in the 30s, you know what I mean? So that was just who he was,
Right.
and so here we are, they loved me the best that they could, I guess, at the time, you know what I mean? I don't, and that's so funny because I found that quote on the ground the other day whenever we were
Yeah.
tossing our quotes back and forth, and it's like, forgive yourself for who you were. You were just doing the best with what you have. And I swear, I look at that and I'm like, they were doing the best with what they had at the time. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, that's it. And so,
Yeah, I've heard it. The counseling. So I've been to plenty of counseling
yeah,
in the past few years. But because one of the things I think one of the things that helped me relate to a lot of people that have gone through their experience in recovery, even though I've never have, right, is that I know what it's like to have a past that feels like a shadow that just like clings onto your back. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And like that post I made yesterday, where I was talking about I don't know how to accept a compliment, right?
right.
So it's because I feel so much, I don't know, shame or like disrespect about myself because of things that I've done in the past where I'm not just a perfect, clean, I didn't
Yeah.
learn. And I've done things where it's like, I'm not proud of it and it haunts me, And so
Well,
I can't accept your compliment because I don't see myself that way at all. I don't think I deserve that. I'm just trying to do something better now and do with that whatever you will.
I feel that
But
for real. Like, whenever you were doing your
yeah,
introduction, you were talking about it, and I'm just like,
yeah.
you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah, it makes you, yeah, exactly right. Especially when people like, if you're about to, I know you did this because you've spoken on stages a lot too, but whenever like I'm about to go out on stage and go make whatever, if I'm going to talk at a podcast event or a mental health event, whatever it is, and then they read off like your little bio before you go up there, and Ty King is da, 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 and, like all these really great things make you sound wonderful, and I'm like, oh my God, like I can't stand to listen to this. Just say my name and I'll come up there, and then
Absolutely.
I'm gonna divert all the attention to everybody else on stage.
Absolutely.
But like we were saying, they were loving you the best that they could at the time because of who they were at the time.
Yeah.
My therapist has told me, you shouldn't feel so much shame about what you did because you were doing the best that you could with the choices that you thought that you had. Because in retrospect, we look back and we see, oh man, I could have done this, and any one of those scenarios would have turned out 1,000% better than
Right.
what I did. He said, but you didn't know that. And
Yeah.
you thought that you had these two doors open, not knowing that there was a whole circle of different doors that you could have gone through.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's why I say it so much. Like, that's why it's so important for us who have lived those. And even though you don't know the recovery component, right? But you know the lifestyle component, you know what I mean? And so, like, it's so important. Like, we have to break that stigma, you know what I mean? Like, we have to be those voices for the people who don't realize that it's okay. Like, this is the one thing people need to realize too. Like, just because people didn't get caught, like, that's another thing too. Like, we happen to just get caught. You know what I mean? Like, there are so many people in so different, many places in life who live a lie and who never got caught, and they continue to keep doing what they're doing and they can go on and live productive lives. But because we got caught, we are at an advantage because now we can say, like,
Oh yeah.
this is my life, and that's why I think I love, as much as I get anxiety when I do those things, like going on stage and doing, even now, like, you think I wouldn't, as many times as I've done it. But it's so important for me because every time that I share my story, every time that I speak about it, I give it that much more power that I'm taking away from it. Like, that much more power I'm taking away, and I can say, like, you're not going to hold on to me like that
Yeah.
anymore. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think when you have, whether you've been through substance use, which comes with a lot of different things to the lifestyle, like other choices that you make, it's not just doing the drugs, right?
Right.
It's also all the stuff that surrounds it. But same for me, where it was just like chaotic, living in that type of household that we were talking about, and then being out on my own for the first time, which my son is 18, terrifies me right now. But being on my own for the first time, and then just immediately dropping out of college and going to do all these other things and hanging out with these crowds, and like there's lots of times where it could have got me in a lot of different trouble, or who knows what would have happened. But knowing now, who you are now and everything that you've come through, the same thing with me and anybody that's in recovery, I think, is that now you know what there is to lose. Like, you know what that's like. You've experienced that. It's not just a theory anymore. Like, you've seen what it's like to be at your lowest. Um, and
So many
so
times.
because of that, the stakes are higher. And so you have more motivation to do better,
Yeah.
I think, than the average person gets.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to do out of all the things I do is I go back into the school system. And I started doing that, because that's really where it started for me. Like, I was 13 years old, the very first time I ever put, and I won't even say a substance because I had put multiple substances in my body prior to that. Like, I just, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was just trying to escape it the way I was
Mm.
feeling,
Yeah.
but when I found my drug of choice when I was 13, um, I'll never forget it, and I look at my kids now and I'm like, I can't even imagine them living a life like that. Like, I
Yeah.
can't, so that's why that component of it right there is more important to me than any of the other ones that I do. Like, when I speak in the reentry space or the recovery space, I love going back to speak to the kids because I look at them and I'm like, that saying, by the grace of God, there go I, and so I can pick them out in a room every time, like, I know which ones they are. And it's so funny to me because, when I went back the very first time, and I go back to Cabot a lot to speak, and the teacher was like, I had no idea that those kids were even going through that. And I'm like, you don't, because
Yeah.
nobody ever asks them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, nobody ever stops to ask them, like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
Or, like, how do you really even start that conversation? Like, "Are things at your home life okay?"
Yeah.
And so, like, nobody those are uncomfortable conversations that, one, that they're not equipped to ask, they're not prepared to ask,
Yeah.
and then if they ask them, what are they gonna do with it once it's there?
Yeah, because even so, like, even as a kid, you kind of felt pressure where, like, I don't know if I could trust you.
Right.
And also, like, if this gets back to my parents, like, who are the ones that are doing all it, like,
I'm gonna be in trouble.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Like,
So I'm just gonna say, everything's good. Yeah,
yeah.
walk off probably.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so, like, every time I go back and then they just open up to me and I love it, and
yeah,
and I'm able to provide those resources and stuff for them. And I don't, and let me say that I don't love it that they have those experiences, but I love it that they feel that that space is safe where they can say those things
yeah,
that they are,
yeah,
and it's amazing. Like, it's really, it's therapeutic for me, but it's also so therapeutic for them because, we talk about the power of lived experience. You know what I
mhm,
mean? Like,
yeah,
who better to tell a story about addiction than somebody who's lived through it? You know, I mean,
Right.
who better than to talk about incarceration than somebody who's experienced it?
Exactly.
You know, like, I mean, I now, now that I'm further along in my recovery, I'm able to listen to the experts and what they have to say. But in those early years, like, I didn't want to hear anything, and anybody who hadn't been through that situation had to say, because it was invalid to me.
Yeah.
And so it's just important for me to make sure that I go back to the schools and I start to, and I really open up that dialogue for them, so that they have a safe place where they can go to.
It's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did you get started with your first substances?
So my parents, they did this thing, the back and forth, right? Like together, separated. And even though they did not use, I always say my parents should have been addicts, because the chaos that we lived in was like an addict's home.
Yeah.
Um, I had an older sister, and so she was like, it's so crazy too, because my sister is she's a psychiatric APRN now, and I'm like, how crazy is that? Like, we went completely different area.
Yeah.
But it happened, but she was part, when you're a kid, like, especially living in a small town and you're a kid, there is literally nothing to do. Like, if you weren't in a field dying of alcohol poisoning, what were you doing with your life? Like, that's what we did. And so I just happened to be from a very small town, and I will talk about it here, but meth, Arkansas is the meth capital of the world, like, at that, literally, especially the United States, like, meth.
Really?
Yeah, meth is our drug. Like, now with the fentanyl crisis and the opioid epidemic, of
Uh,
course, it's creeping up, but meth will always take number one in Arkansas. And then you look in the late 90s and the early 2000s, it was an everyday occurrence here. And so it was just, that's what it
That's
was.
interesting. Yeah. So are they still like? Cause I don't know. Where's it coming from? Well, I guess it's just a different question, but like I remember, what was it, early 2010s or so. I mean, where there was like all these meth cooks that were getting busted,
Yeah.
right? Is that still a thing here, or are they bringing right to the border now?
Yeah, they're coming over the border now, but back in those days, you were still able to access all the things that they needed to make it. And so, one of my, we grew up together, but we rode the school bus since we were kids. But like, once again, you don't ever know what a kid's going through. And his parents were meth cooks, and they lived
Yeah.
right up the street from us. And so I will never forget that first time. Like, I remember I drank and I smoked, I did all the normal kid stuff, but I was 13, and the first time I ever got high on meth. And I remember that feeling like, this is what I've needed my whole life. You know what I mean? Like that, I can laugh about it now, but I remember in that instant when I got high for the first time, I was like, this is the key to my happiness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, literally, all the pain, all the depression, all the sadness that I felt was gone that quick. And I was like, "Oh, this is what I need." And it starts out, nobody becomes an addict in one day,
Mm.
and so, like, I remember it was, like, on the weekends, we'd go and we'd get high, and he'd get it from his parents or whoever was in his life, and then it progressed, right? So we're just on the weekends, and then I've started finding myself, like, where I was buying it or getting it from him, and then I would do a little in the morning whenever I was getting up to go to school, and then eventually, yeah, like, literally.
Fuck with that thing going to school.
I mean, literally, and so, like, or I was popping
Oh
capsules,
my
you
God.
mean, like, I was popping capsules, and I was the most
Is that it?
productive. So, like, you take, like a little, like, dietary capsules that you can pull apart, like, dump the stuff out, and we put it in a capsule.
Whenever you swallow.
Yeah, because let's be realistic. I mean, I was that age. I didn't know how to smoke things, and I couldn't flick a lighter because my parents would hear it. So I would just
Oh.
pop capsules, and then I'd go to school. I was so productive. Like, you would have thought my life had changed, and, like, from the
So I'm so
outside looking in.
yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so
No.
ignorant on the
Yeah.
drugs and how they work. So what is it, a powder?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
So it's just like, okay,
Kind of like cocaine. It was powdery back then,
gotcha, gotcha.
and then I would just pop,
Capsule.
yeah, put it as a capsule, and I'd go to school, and then I was excelling. Like, I was like the best student ever. I would stay up and do all my homework, and everything was so,
Hey,
yeah, I
we'll
stay up
see.
all night doing my homework. Everything was written so
Yeah.
perfectly. It was great. And my teachers were probably like, dang, something's happening in her life, like, something good. That's probably what they thought at first, because I was just productive and I was doing all the things. But then eventually, that's when the unmanageability starts to play in, right? So now, eventually, you have to come down. I would miss school because I, was not feeling good, or
Mm.
you stay up too long, and then I wasn't eating right, and then I had these mood swings because now my serotonin and my dopamine's all irregulated, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm just lashing out, acting crazy. um and it just started to progress from the weekends to now I need it, I gotta have it, and give me more.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that I graduated from high school, but what was so crazy is like that time span from like 14 to 17, my life was crazy. Like all the signs were there for my parents to be like, she needs help. Like there was one night I didn't come home at all because I ate a bunch of ecstasy and I was like, I can't go home like this. And so then I remember I came home and the Arkansas State Police was in my house with the Morgan Nick alert. And, they were, I mean, looking for me because I'd been gone for over 24 hours.
Yeah.
And my parents were like, are you on drugs? And I remember in that moment, I have to admit to something because I know
Yeah.
something's up. And my dad was like, we're going to take you to the hospital. And I'm like, okay, I just drank alcohol and I smoked weed. And so by me admitting that, I guess they didn't feel the need to take me to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then, like, shortly after that, I was coming from Carlisle to Cabot, and I hit an 18-wheeler. I it was crazy. I shouldn't have lived through that. I hit an 18-wheeler, doing like 70 miles an hour. I never hit my brakes hardly one time, and it was only because I was in my dad's truck that I didn't die. But you see this on my arm, like where it does the weird thing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I literally graduated high school that year in a wheelchair because my arm was the reason it did that is because when I hit, it broke it. And I had this external fixator on my arm. My legs were broken. I mean, like I was broken in every way you could think of. I should have been dead.
You hit it head on?
No, I rear-ended it
You rear-ended this out.
and it was sitting still. Yeah. And so then my parents bought me cars. My dad had gotten remarried and they kept buying me these cars. I didn't have them for like maybe 6 months, wreck them. Like everything in my life was so unmanageable.
Yeah.
And I know what it is now, so I can look for that in my kids, which they're like, to look at my kids and to look at me, I'm like the night and day. But like all the signs were there. But this is the problem back in the late 90s, early 2000s is that the resources weren't there. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't rehabs, and plus I was an adolescent. There wasn't any resources for kids.
Right.
Like the only thing that they had for kids back then was to send them to like juvenile detention or to send them to like behavioral health.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like either you're gonna go to lockdown or you're gonna go to mental lockdown.
Right. That's what I did with the other podcast that I helped produce on Smart Justice. That's
Yeah.
what the whole last season was about, was juvenile justice in the state. And we
Yeah.
found out that there were more there are more institutions for children than there are for adults in Arkansas, which is a huge problem, and they don't know what to do with them. And we did an interview with this girl that was in a DYS lockup in Alexander, and she had been in and out of that same facility, and but her addiction started when she was like 13 years old, and
Yeah.
she was about to be 18. And like the story she was telling me was like, it sounded like a full grown 50-year-old adults telling me their life story because all the things that she had been through. It's
Absolutely.
like, oh my god. I'm like, yeah, we just don't know what to do with kids that are at that age and on any kind of substances or addiction. And it's like, what we think that, because I'm gonna ask you this, if you had any thoughts before you took your first the hit of meth or whatever you call it. But like we think that the preventative measures that we put into schools are going to do a great job of like Wheat or the DARE program or things
Say
like
no
that.
to drugs.
Yeah, right. McGruff the crime dog.
Don't stamp out smoking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just say no.
Yeah.
Uh,
Just say no.
this is your brain on drugs.
Yeah.
And so like with all of that going on, was that ever a thought in your mind whenever you first did your first drug?
That stuff was so comical to me. Like I remember being in those. I remember like they would literally bring the McGruff, the crime dog in, and
Yeah.
he was a dog
Yeah.
dressed up like, you know what I mean? Like it was funny. And even if you think about any of the preventive measures that they bring to schools, and they talk about sex and stuff. So what they do, they show you how to put a condom on a banana. Like, come on, man. Like this is not realistic and this is not real life. Like in their minds, they're doing their due diligence to teach us about what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
No. And that's the thing about addiction. It does not discriminate, right? Like, I mean, people that back in those days in my school, I mean, it was everybody from, the rich kids with all the money, the athletes, all the way down, to the poor kids. Everybody did the drugs,
Yeah.
but that's the thing about addiction. It will grab a hold, you don't know, you don't know who it's going to affect and like who it's going to take a hold of. I was one of those that was like, "Oop, this is mine, and I'm gonna keep this in a little box, and I'm keeping it forever." Like that was my mind. Like I remember telling myself that when I was a kid, like, "I'm just gonna keep this forever. Like this
Yeah.
is my happy place."
Right. I think if you live in Arkansas, it's too it's such a normal story to be in a town where there's nothing to do, but drugs are plentiful, right?
Mhm.
And so like you're bored, there's nothing to do,
Yes.
there's a lot of trauma in there. It's not being addressed, but
Yes.
you could pretty much get drugs absolutely anywhere.
Absolutely.
And that makes for a big. I remember when I was in when I was incarcerated, and like almost every white guy in there, it's like, where are you from? Fort Smith. What for? Possession of meth. It's like
Yeah.
everybody was from Fort Smith, and they were on meth, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh my god, this is a real problem
For real.
in our state. Yeah.
Yeah, it was horrible. Yeah, and then I just took it and I went with it, and it was
Yeah.
crazy. You know what's so crazy too is that even through all this unmanageability and chaos, I still managed to graduate high school early. And so like I did these correspondence classes, which was a joke, you know what I mean? Like I think I cheated the whole way through those correspondence classes, and then I went to summer school, and then they made you do some community service hours, and then I graduated early. So I actually graduated school December of 2023
Yeah.
or 2023, 2003, and then I walked in 2004. But yeah, I had no supervision, so once I graduated high school, I thought I was grown, you couldn't tell me anything. And that is really whenever the addiction when I had that car accident, that is where the addiction took hold of me.
Mm.
Because now am I not only addicted to meth, but now this is the early 2000s whenever the opioid epidemic was like jumping on the scene, you know what I mean? And they were like, hey, they're these painkillers and they're great and they're not addictive and they're not habit forming. And I can remember being in that hospital bed and they were pumping me full of them.
Wow.
And I, of course, when you're an addict, you're manipulative, and I'm like, I'm in so much pain. I was in pain, but they were just like, keep on giving me more. And in my mind, I think about that now. I'm like, did they not run like a toxicology on me whenever I had that wreck?
Right.
Like, did they not do any of that? Probably not, because guess what? I was a kid. And number two, my stepmom worked for the hospital. You know what I mean? So, like,
Mm.
and my dad did at the time. And so I think that when they brought me to the hospital, they're probably just like, oh, it's James and Bond's kid.
Yeah.
But I was out of there. And so I get out of the hospital, and that's whenever my life started to look a lot different. No longer am I just using drugs with like little petty dealing here and there, just for my habit. That is whenever I found the game.
Yeah. What is the game?
The game, yeah. So one thing I have found out through recovery is that I have a codependency problem too. And it always manifests in the form of a relationship.
Yeah.
And so I found this guy, and he was a drug dealer, and he's the one who showed me how, we could sell these drugs and make lots of money.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
While you're also doing them.
While we're also doing them. And so not only can we support our habit, but we can make lots of money doing it.
Yeah.
And so then that spiraled a whole different addiction for me. Like, because I am an addict in true form.
Yeah.
Like, and I still have to even watch myself now in my recovery, because I can get addicted to like working out too much or too many, it manifests in different ways. And so when I figured this out, like I could make some money, and then I could, and I was good at it, here we go.
Yeah. Now you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yes. And that's exactly what I thought too.
Yeah.
I'm like, now I'm a businesswoman. You know what I mean? And now I'm a businesswoman,
Right.
and I am making lots of money, and you can't tell me anything.
Right.
You can't tell me nothing.
Yeah.
And so that's how I lived for, multiple years, in and out of hotel rooms, like we didn't, and I look back at it now and I'm like, really, it was just history repeating itself, because I didn't know what a stable home environment was as a kid, right? Like my whole childhood, nothing was ever stable. And into my like real addiction, like I didn't know what a stable home environment was either. It was normal for me to like pick up my stuff and move ever so often, because that's what you do whenever you're selling drugs.
Yeah.
Hotel to hotel, trap house to trap house. And that was my life, and I was okay with it.
Yeah. What does a trap house look like?
Oh, it's horrible. It's literally everything that like whenever you like watch movies and stuff and how they
Yeah.
depict it, it's dirty. There's people in and out. I mean, like
Is
all
that kind
hours
of
of
like
the
an
night.
abandoned house?
No, it's not abandoned, but you are a lot of times it's just a dirty environment. You have all kinds of people using drugs, falling asleep in there. They're there, they can't have nowhere else to go, so then they're there. It's just nasty.
Yeah.
I look back at that and I'm like, God, like I can't, it makes you cringe, you know what I mean? Like I would allow myself to live in environments like that and be okay with it.
Yeah.
That's why we stayed in the hotels a lot because, it was a cleaner space. But
Right.
when you're selling drugs, you want to go to the place where the people are at. And so that's where they are at,
Yeah.
you know? And that's probably why I was always there, just because we had to make some money. Yeah. But so that guy, he eventually goes to jail. And then I meet my oldest kid's dad. And he was really like my ticket away from the life. You know what I mean? Like he let me he him and I are he's one of my best friends to this day. And I meet him and it wasn't 3 months of us being together and I got pregnant at 18. And life looked different then. And so I get pregnant at 18 and I remember when I got pregnant, I remember telling myself like I'd quit everything. All the drugs, smoking, I mean everything. Like I remember telling myself like I'm going to be a mom to this baby that I never had.
Yeah.
Like, that was my whole goal. Like, I remember telling myself that. And, like, once again, not knocking my mom because she was just doing the best with what she had, but I remember telling her, like, or telling myself, like, I'm going to love this baby and I'm going to be good to this baby. And so then I literally put all the substances down and I was working 2 full-time jobs. I was in school. Um, I was clean, right? But I did not know what recovery was. And that's something that people need to understand. Like, there's a huge difference. Like, you can be clean and just white knuckle it through life, or you can be in recovery, and that in recovery is where I addressed all the things, all the underlying things that cause the addiction. And so I didn't do any of that. I was just clean. I didn't look at the trauma. I didn't look at, any of that. And I was just going through the motions and doing what I was supposed to do for him,
Mm.
and so I stayed clean the whole time I was pregnant with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah. And I've heard about that. The was big difference pain. Like, and I guess it's also, a lot of crossover with reentry as well, where it's like, okay, why do you, why are you holding a steady job, getting a house, and doing all these
Mhm.
things that you're supposed to be doing to make yourself a stable, life? Is it
Yeah.
for someone else or is it for you? You know what I mean? Because it has to be for you.
Right.
You know what I mean? At
Yeah.
that point, you got to do it for yourself if no one else, because they're not going to benefit if you're just doing it for somebody else.
Absolutely. And that was my whole mission in life was just to do it for him,
Yeah.
and like and then there's something that I was really young. I was 18 when I got pregnant with him and I lacked humility and I was very cocky and I remember thinking like and I remember even saying it back then like if I can quit doing drugs, see this is not I'm not an addict, you know what I mean? Like I remember I had some kind of idea of what an addict was, but I remember when I quit like I did,
Mhm.
I remember telling myself, like, I'm not really an addict. If I was really an addict, I would be able to quit like that.
Right.
And so I lived like that. I mean, like I was clean the whole time I was pregnant with him, and then for a good little bit after I had him. But there's something that a lot of people don't talk about and that is so real, especially if you look at women. And that's why I do a lot of the work that I do now, because postpartum depression is something that's so super real.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going crazy, Ty. Like I remember having him and I remember looking at him and he cried all the time. You know what I mean? Like he was sick all the time. He had asthma, he was all these sicknesses and I had to put him in daycare at an early age. And so like he was always sick. And I remember being so sad. But because of my conditioning as a kid, we don't talk about being sad. You know what I mean? And so like I'm just like I have to keep moving, keep doing all the things and just kind of push it to the wayside. And I say this and people look at me crazy when I say this, but it's the reality. And I've always told myself like I will always be fully transparent about my life. I do understand why women or men, but mainly women commit shaken baby syndrome, why they shake babies. See, even looking at your face right now, like that's the look I always get. But I can remember in those moments, like when I was so depressed, like I was deficient in all the vitamins. I remember my hair was falling out because my vitamin deficiency was so depleted from having him, and I wasn't taking care of myself. And I was going to school, working full time, 2 jobs, and that he would just cry and cry and cry. And I can remember thinking that like I wanted to shake him, and that makes me sick to my stomach. You know what I mean? And so I remember even thinking that and so then I also remembered what is the one thing in my life where I found happiness. And so that's how it started. Like, I'm just going to get high on the weekends, because I need to get caught up on the housework. I need to get caught up on my schoolwork. That's what I was going to tell myself. That's what I told myself, like, I'm just going to do it on the weekends. And then that's how it's what we always tell ourselves, right? As addicts, we manipulate ourselves into believing that we can control this,
Yeah.
that I can have control. This time was going to be different.
Yeah.
And so that's what I told myself. And, yeah, these lies, these horrible lies that we literally convince ourselves of. And so, and that's how it started. It was just the weekend, but it wasn't, it was so quick. And then I was right back into the same pattern of what I was doing before.
Right.
I didn't even drop out of school. Like I just quit going to school. Like I was like, oop, I'm done. And so I didn't withdraw. So like that's still on my school record to this day because I was trying to go back to school not too long ago. And they're like, yeah, you better pay a lot of money back if you're going to even do that because I did not withdraw properly.
Oh, yeah.
And I had student loans and all that stuff. But I just quit going to school. I quit working. And then very quickly, I found myself right back into the same habit of selling drugs like I was before to support my habit because who wants to pay for drugs, you know?
Yeah.
Who wants to do that? Nobody
Right.
does. And I was no longer a mom to him, and it started out as like me getting high while he was there. And then I justified it in my brain, like, I don't want to do this around my kids. So I would, move around. And then it eventually led to me just never coming back home. And it's those lies that you tell yourself, like, I'm doing what's best for him because it's better for me to be absent than for me to be doing this in the house with him.
Yeah.
And so then I was gone, and then right back out and doing the same thing, same song, different dance, set with different people, so a lot of the same people, because guess what? They say 2% of people who have been through meth addiction, make it out. And so when you go back into those scenes, all the same people are still there. Guess what? They're just
Yeah.
the same miseries there waiting for you, know? And so that's what it looked like for the next couple years.
So you were at your latter half with the teenage years. You were about to be an adult at George.
Mm.
It's 20. You already had a child at 18.
Yeah.
But you're about to be 20 years old.
Mhm.
And like, how long did this go on for?
It's like 6 years. And so at this point, my parents knew something was up. They've been knowing something is up, and then they kind of started, to want, like, kept threatening like to take him from me, but they never did it. And then so he stayed with his dad. And 6 years later, we can fast forward because we can tell the war stories. But 6 years later, I get pregnant with my daughter. And, you think I would know what caused that, but, when you're in addiction, you're not thinking about anything. And so, and I would love to tell you that when I got pregnant with her, that I was that righteous person and I did all the things like I did with him, and I quit doing the drugs, and I got my life together. But I was so far in active addiction and in the lifestyle that there was no stopping. And I used almost the whole time I was pregnant with her.
It's not the same dad either, right?
No, no.
Somebody else.
Yeah, somebody else. And I used almost all the time I was pregnant with her. And, I'll never forget, I was with another, this is the chaos, right? I was with another guy, not her dad. I was with another guy. And, I remember I had her, and he's back in the feds now, but he's just a crazy guy. Like, wasn't anything for him to tote guns, shoot people. I mean, he was just,
Yeah.
that's who he was. And so she was like 3 weeks old. And I mean, literally, she's a newborn. And I'm with this guy. And this was like the first like real encounter I had with the law. And uh, the night before that, the cops actually showed up. Like, I remember I was freaking out. Like, when you're high and you're in that life and you're paranoid, um, you think everybody's the police. Like that's just like a common thing. Like everybody's the police. But this night, like I knew something was different. I had my best friend. I had her take her, and I told her to take her out to the country to get her out of the house. And like, don't bring her back until I tell you to bring her back. And sure enough, the next morning, the guy that I was with, he had a federal warrant for his arrest, and that day was that day set the trajectory for the rest in my time in addiction. Like it was just chaos. So we were so crazy and in the life, like we had a motorcycle in the kitchen, and we kept it in the kitchen because one, it was stolen. Two, if we ever needed it to get away, you know what I mean? It was in the kitchen, and we could have
Motorcycle
in the kitchen, in the kitchen.
I've seen like people keep their bicycles or something.
Mm-mm. No, no, no. We had this crotch rocket in the kitchen because I had this house where it had a carport, but
Yeah.
so like if we ever had to get down, it was easy to get down. So the next morning I wake up,
You have to drive out the kitchen.
swear to God. The next morning I wake up and my kid's dad, he calls me, my oldest kid's dad, he calls me and he's like, the feds are at your mom's house. And I'm like, you're not comprehending. I'm like, what? And he's like, the feds are at your mom's house.
Yeah.
And, so I'm thinking they're there for me, but no, I had bonded him out of jail. And so, like, one of the things is, and anybody who's listening to this who's been in active addiction, they know you have like these safe places. And so, my mom's house was always like my safe place because she was consistent and, she had the same house all the time. And so, my driver's license, when I bonded him out, is my mom's address. And so, that's where they went to go look for us, was at my mom's house. And, he's like, the feds are at your mom's house. And so, when he calls and tells me this, I wake him up. I'm like, we got to go. And we get on this motorcycle in the kitchen, like Bonnie and Clyde. We open up the door. Unbeknownst to us, that my house is surrounded by the police,
Yeah.
like the U.S. Marshals and all these different agencies are surrounding my house. We don't even know it. And we hop on this motorcycle and we take off. And then here it goes, the high-speed chase.
Yeah.
And they're chasing us. And they eventually get us. Like, we go all the way down through, we're living in Jacksonville in the hood. And they finally get us and they hit us head on. And he had a body attachment for a warrant for his arrest. And at that point, my parents were like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. And then they had filed for an ex parte order to take both my kids.
What is a body attachment?
So with the feds, like, they have like this thing, like, where it's just a body attachment, like they are there for the person. Like, so if you look at the state and how, like, the state buzz people, like, a lot of times they'll bust a house to go in to get more drugs so they know drugs are there.
Yeah.
With the feds, they already have all this investigation beforehand. So, like, in order to get a federal indictment, like, they have all this evidence. They took it to a grand jury and it was enough evidence to indict. So at this point, if they get anything extra in the mix, cool. If not, they have plenty to get you on already.
Yeah.
And so they just had the body attachment warrant for him.
Oh, wow.
And so they're basically saying, we don't need anything else. We have enough. We just need him now. And so we take off and they hit his head on. And they end up arresting him. And then my parents filed for the ex parte order for my kids. And I went on the run with my daughter after that. Yeah. Yeah.
For how long?
Not that long, because, criminals were not very smart. You know what I mean? And it wasn't that long. Probably, like, I would say less than 5 days.
Yeah.
And then they finally get me. And, they tell me, hey, we're going to take you to jail because we have this ex parte order, which anybody that's listening that doesn't know what that is basically my parents went into the judge and got an emergency hearing saying, hey, she's not fit. We need to get these kids. And so technically my kids were no longer my kids anymore. They were a ward to my parents. And so they tell me, hey, either you give us your daughter or we're going to charge you with kidnapping. And at that time, I couldn't get high anymore, right? If I'm in jail for kidnapping, and then my daughter's going to be in a trap house with other people. So I made the conscious decision to turn my kid over at that time. But all of that did, Ty, was give me the permission slip as addicts that we look for.
Yeah. Now
to
your
keep,
freedom.
yeah, to keep doing what we're doing.
Right. Right.
Because my kids are safe, right? They're at my mom's house. They're safe. And, here I go. And you know what's crazy? At this point, all my parents wanted me to do was to go to rehab, get clean, and get my kids back.
Yeah.
That's all. That's what they wanted me to do. I say that's all. That's a lot. It was a lot for me, you know what I mean? But that's what they wanted me to do. But I was so deep in my addiction and my lifestyle that I couldn't do it. Like, we talked about this earlier, like, I was doing the best with what I had because at that moment, I did not see a way out. You know what I mean? Like, I remember telling myself that stuff all the time, like I was in too deep and I didn't see a way out. And so I did what any addict does, and we manipulate me, lie. I remember I ghosted for 30 days and told my parents I was in treatment. And I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I had a friend of mine who was going to celebrate. The only time I'd ever heard of recovery, she was going to these meetings, and I found, it was celebrate recovery. But I had her getting a sheet signed for me, like I was going to these meetings. I was not, and I manipulated and I lied my way through that. And I remember one day, like right before the end of that court case, and I was beating hair follicles. I was beating all these tests, and in my mind, I think I had this like moment of clarity, like, even if you get them back, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with them?
Right.
And I purposely failed a hair follicle test. And then that, they took them from me.
Yeah.
And then here we go. Right. So now, now I know, okay, now it's out in the open. Like, I had never admitted like I was using these drugs, even though I'd been in jail. My parents didn't know all this stuff, but they had them, and I didn't get to see them for a long time. But that was just my excuse to rip and run. So then we fast forward some more years because it's the same song, different dance,
Yeah.
in and out of their lives, lying, manipulating, telling them that I'm doing all these things that I'm not. And, they're not stupid.
Yeah.
And then I meet my youngest son's dad,
Yeah.
and he had F the police, but it wasn't F. It was the whole word. F the police tattooed on his shins, very big. He had swastikas all over
Of
him.
course.
And he was fresh out of doing 11 years in the
Yeah.
penitentiary, and I was in love.
Or eligible bachelor. Yeah, of course.
The most eligible bachelor. And I had really short hair at the time, but if I could have flipped it, I would have flipped it because
Yeah.
I was in love.
Yeah.
I meet him, right? Like, so we meet.
Well, I'm good. I'm glad we're getting into this because I was going to ask you. We can go back another question.
Yeah.
So, like we mentioned, several people that you had been with at the time, especially when you're in your, addiction.
Mhm.
What was it that you found? I guess what attracted you to these people? These certain guys. Like, what was it about them that was like, this is a good partner for me?
Everything in that lifestyle, in addiction, and in the game, in the life is a transactional relationship.
Mm,
You know what I mean? It really is. And I tell people that all the time. Like, it wasn't until I found recovery that I really understand what it meant to have people who were genuine in my life, because everything in that life is transactional. What can you do for me?
yeah.
What do you have? What do I need? So it was one of those things, like they either needed something from me or I needed something from them.
Yeah.
And we're selling drugs, you know what I mean? And so that's how I would end up with these people, because, we had a common, denominator between us, and that was selling drugs,
Yeah.
and so, like, that's how we would end up together, and so, like, especially when you're living, especially as a female in that lifestyle, I would seek out these men who I felt like could protect me in a sense, right? Because whenever you're a female drug dealer, you're fair game, you know what I mean? Like, for robberies, for anything, you know what I mean? Like, people are quick to look to a woman and be like, I can get down on her. So I would seek these men who I felt like, could be my match in this lifestyle. There was no rhyme or reason in that time. It was horrible. It was like every characteristic that that you should ignore in a person. You know what I mean? Like, violent, been to prison. I mean, like, if they didn't have an ADC number, multiple tattoos, been to prison
Yeah.
5 times, I didn't mess with them. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
everything I should have avoided was what I was drawn to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I was going to give this a Freudian,
Yeah.
overlook, it's like you were raised by parents that were super strict, and it seemed like these guys were the exact
Yeah.
opposite of that, where they were just
Just
chaos.
chaos. I mean, like, I was the chaos, right? Like, I was still addicted to the chaos, right? But I mean, it was just, the fast life. Like, they had what I wanted, or I had what they wanted, and that's how we did, and that's where it went. Yeah, but I meet my kid's dad, my youngest son's dad.
Swastikas on his chest,
Hmm.
F the police,
Oh yeah.
sanctions. I'm sure there was more. And then fresh out of, he said 11
Yeah, he
years
did 11 years to the door, and
on a violent charge.
violent and drugs. I mean, like,
Mm,
he was crazy in every word that you could think of. But we met because he had just got out of prison and he had a lot of drugs and he needed somebody to get rid of him. And so this girl was like, "Hey, I know this girl, let her rock that, she gets down." And he was like, "Introduce me to her," And so we
yeah.
met, and it that quickly turned into the most
They,
volatile relationship you could ever imagine,
they introduced him to you because why?
because he needed to get rid of these drugs.
Okay. Okay.
And so she's like, "I know this girl, Little Rock, that,
Gotcha.
she does her
Gotcha.
thing."
So they
You know
weren't
what I
playing
mean?
matchmaker. They were just
Oh no,
really,
she was just trying to probably get her own,
yeah.
her own hookup in the middle of it, for helping him out.
Yeah.
And so she introduces him to me, and then here we go. And I remember, like, that, so I am a very willful person, very outspoken. I've always been like that, even in addiction. And so you put somebody like that, and plus I had this imaginary facade in my mind of, like, who I was, right? Like, the drugs, and
Go to the south.
pretty much, yeah. Like, I was the queen pin, you know what I mean? Like, I thought I was it, and then he humbled me in every aspect of my life at that point. Um, yeah, it quickly turned into the most spiritually, morally, physically, emotionally bankrupt relationship in my life. To the point where he would beat me like a man daily.
Oh my God.
And you know what's crazy is I look back at all those times in my life, like, as I was getting those beatings. And I can remember justifying it in my mind, like, this is my karma. Like, I remember thinking that, like, this is my karma. Like, this is what I get for, being this horrible mother, right? Like, this is what I get for all this destruction and hell and chaos that I've caused. Like, I used to think this, like, this was God sending him to me to give me my karma
I
for
deserve this.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, for the bad person that I am, And then not only that, there's, like, a level of when you're with a narcissist and the level of manipulation and craziness, I really thought I was in love and that if he didn't love me, he wouldn't do this, like the lies you tell yourself. And, it went on like that for years, and then I eventually got pregnant again, and I remember thinking when I got pregnant, like, there comes a time, like, where you stop thinking that, and you're finally like, "Okay, I'm kind of over this," you know what I mean? Like, I don't wanna get beat up anymore,
Yeah.
and, I thought maybe when I got pregnant that would stop. It did not, and it continued and continued, but this is how crazy addiction is, right? He goes to prison, and then I have the baby, and that was, like, my opportunity to get away from him, and I didn't, and I stayed with him. And then he got out of prison, and I remember there was this one time where he was like, "I don't wanna do any drugs anymore." But I was like, "It's okay." And I reintroduced the drugs back to him. Like, that's the chaos.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
So did you ever stop during that period, or
No.
no?
Mm-mm.
You kept
No,
going
I just kept going.
even throughout the pregnancy.
Mm-mm. I mean, I stopped, like, towards the end of it. Both pregnancies with my daughter and with him, I stopped at the very end of it. And, but, I did use for the majority of my pregnancies. And, it's only by the grace of God that they are great kids. Like,
Sure.
they're functioning and they're great and they don't have any issues, and that's God. That's only God because they came out perfect, at every aspect of the word, like, they didn't have any complications or nothing was wrong. But, we go on like this, for years. And then eventually I had enough. Like, there were many nights, where I didn't think I was gonna live. Like, it wasn't just like him slapping me around. Like, he would beat me to unrecognition, like I couldn't, and you see the scar on my face and everybody. I had somebody tell me one time, "That's a cute dimple." That is not a dimple. That is because he caved the side of my face in with brass knuckles.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And, I had had enough. And so March 3rd, so, like, we're getting to the very end of my addiction. March 3rd of 2017, um, I had no doubt in my mind that that night he was gonna kill me. Um, he told me he was gonna kill me, but this night I felt it, like I had no doubt in my mind. But this is the night that I decided to fight for my life and I shot him twice. Yeah, with my kid in the house.
Wow. The same night that you used the brass knuckles on you.
Mm-mm. That was a different night. But he beat me with this night. He beat me with a Maglite flashlight, and I had to get a bunch of staples in the top of my head. He broke my right wrist and he fractured my right kneecap. And that was the night that I had enough.
Yeah.
And I shot him twice. And my kid was in the house. And you know what's crazy, Ty, is like the disease of addiction is so sick. My kid is sleeping in the other room. I just shot his dad twice. You think, what is your first thought? I need to call somebody for help.
Mhm.
No. My first thought is I have a lot of drugs in this house. And if the police come while it's like this, we're going to prison for the rest of our lives.
Right.
So my first priority was not him or his safety or my child's safety.
Yeah.
It was let me get these drugs out of this house. So whenever these police show up, then, I don't go to prison for a long time.
Right.
And so I did that. I got the drugs out of the house and I went over there and I got my kid. And, they ask all these questions and they're trying to figure out the whole situation. And, um, they take him to the hospital because he's got to go to surgery and stuff. And then they take him to jail. But in that moment, I felt liberated. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like I was liberated, like I defeated the beast. So much to the fact that I went and got warrior tattooed on my neck like 2 days later. And my tattoo artist was like, how whenever I can laugh about this, but you know how tattoo artists are like, so
What's the
why,
story?
yeah, why are you getting this tattoo? And I'm
What's
like,
me to you?
yeah, why are you doing this? I'm like, I shot my kid's dad twice. And I remember he
Yeah.
was like, Zzz. And he got real quiet. I'm like, it's fine, he's in jail. But I remember he just did it real fast and was like, you got to get out of here.
Wow.
You got to get out of here.
So I didn't kill him,
Mm-mm.
and
No.
they came and got him.
Mhm.
That's great. So I guess they said they believed I mean, I know you like this is a true story, but
Oh, no, we had so many prior domestic cases, like so the thing about when you're living that life is, like, I never would call the police, like, there was a couple times I actually did call the police, I never followed through, but, like, he would beat me so bad on multiple occasions, my neighbors would call,
yeah,
and then they would show up, and I would be beat up, so, like, we had, like, 2 separate open domestic cases at the time, and he was on the run,
yeah,
and so there was a history here,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, they knew what it was and how many he tried to kidnap my kid one time, I mean, it was craziness.
Was the gun legal?
It was legal because so fun fact, at this point, I was not a felon at this point. I was not a felon when this happened, and I bought the gun, like, from a legal, firearm outfitters, like,
Oh, okay.
9 hours before this happened.
Oh,
And
wow.
9 hours before this
Oh my
happened,
god.
and the cops, that's one of the things they kept saying, like, "This gun's not registered," and I was like, "Yeah, I just bought it yesterday," and they were
Yeah.
like, I mean, but unbeknownst to me, my life was fixing to change, like, I didn't even realize at this point I was under federal investigation.
Right.
And, the one thing that the cops did say to me, they were like, "Next time, aim better." That's what they said, because, like, I mean, they had
Yeah.
watched how many times, like,
Right.
I mean, like, and I was so uncooperative, and they were angry at me. You know what I mean? Like, they were
Kill
so
you.
angry.
Kill him.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but they were angry at me because how many times they had showed up at my house, to like,
Yeah.
and I would just keep going back, and I kept on putting myself in this situation. And so that happened. And I just went balls to the wall, and then it was very shortly after that, March 20th. So, like, a couple weeks later, I was in North Little Rock driving with my kid, and I got pulled over, and I got busted by the feds with my kid in the car.
Wow. With a lot of drugs and
Yeah, I had it was enough. Yeah, I had like 159 grams of ice and a lot of money. And I went to jail and I got out. And um, I knew that I knew I was going to get federally indicted. And so then I got indicted May 8th of 2017, the day before his second birthday.
wow.
And I remember when they were arresting me, and I was like, "It's my kid's birthday tomorrow." Like, that mattered to them, you know what I mean? Like they cared or
Oh,
something, you know?
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They were like,
All right.
"Okay." Like, "What do you want us to do?" But they took me to jail. And so I was very fortunate that I had parents who cared enough to come get him both times. You know what I mean? They came and got him when I got busted in April, and then they came and got him when I got busted that day. And they took me to jail. And I can remember being in court. You eventually go to court, and it's gibberish. Like, you're being in a federal courtroom and being in a state courtroom are like completely different. It's different. It's just completely different. And my lawyer was like, "Hey, do you want to go to treatment?" And I was like, "Absolutely. Like, anything to get me out of here."
Yeah.
Not because I was ready to get clean,
Right. Right.
but because I just wanted to get out of jail. Yeah, let's go.
Mhm.
But that's really when my life began to change.
So it actually took when you went to treatment.
Yeah.
So was it because you were in a federal, right? You were
Mm.
with federal, and I didn't know that they had alternative sentencing for federal
They don't really have, well,
charges.
they do now. At the time, I didn't get alternative sentencing. I went to prison, but
Yeah.
uh, they let me out on pretrial release, and they mandated me to recovery centers of Arkansas.
Okay.
And so I went there. Um, and once again, remember I told you earlier, like, I was so resistant to anything anybody had to say to me. Like,
Yep.
I was really just going through the motions because that's what you do when, like, I was also a martyr, you know what I mean? Like, poor, pitiful me. My life is in shambles. I just shot my kid's dad. I'm federally indicted, and I wasn't trying to hear anything anybody had to say,
Right.
But they used to do this thing, and they still do it, where, like, different fellowships in recovery will go into these facilities to bring the message of recovery. And so it was whenever these women used to come in and they would share their stories and they would come in, that's when the seeds started to get planted for me. And I'm like listening, like, that's when I started to listen. So I get out of treatment and they tell me I can't go home. I have to go to sober living. So I would spend the next 6 months in a sober living. It was actually RCA Williamsburg before they turned it to all men. And that is where the magic happened.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's where my life started to change.
That's great. Did they have peer support there, or
Mm-mm.
no? They're
No.
just clinicians and
Yeah, peer support wasn't even a thing really yet. So I'm in recovery and I'm going to meetings every day. And that is when my life started to look so different. Like, I remember like being so emotional. Like I always tell this story and it's funny to me, but I had a friend of mine and he had the scooter and he was like, "Let's go ride on this scooter,
Yeah.
like a moped." You know what I mean? He's like, "It's new." It wasn't new; it was old. But he's like, "Let's go riding on my moped." And I remember just riding on this moped with him and being so emotional, like what they say, happy, joyous, and free. And like not even realizing, like just so much gratitude for my life, even in that moment, right? And it was so funny because like he was a big guy, I'm not that small, and so we're on this scooter. We couldn't even make it up a hill, and he's like, "You got to get off and push me," and I'm like, "Really?" And so I'm pushing him up this hill, and he's like, "Get back on," And so like that's like one of the first like real happy moments I can remember in early recovery. But I was able to laugh again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Out of all the accomplishments in my life, the one that's most important to me is in that first year of my recovery, I got the Volunteer of the Year award at my baby's pre-K because I was always and really what's funny is like I wasn't really trying to volunteer, but he used to cry every time I drop him off, and so I could never just leave him. And so like I would just stay there and then help him out all day long. And so but they knew my whole story, right? And they didn't even judge me, like that.
Wow.
It was amazing, man. I was really blessed in early recovery with some instrumental people in my life who believed in me,
Yeah.
and who were there the whole way.
Right.
Yeah, so I did pretrial for like 18 months. And so it's funny you say something about peer support. So the very next year I had exactly 1 year clean, and Jimmy, our friend Jimmy, Jimmy and I have known each other for 20 years, and he was like, "Hey, I want you to sign up for this training." And I'm like, "What is this training?" He's like, "Just trust me, sis, just sign up for the training." And I don't even have a clue what it is. But this was the very first training that they had for peer support.
Hmm.
So I was one of I think there was like 32 of us who went through the training
Wow.
for peer support in Arkansas.
So you're in the first class?
The very first, yeah.
Wow. Okay. I
Yeah.
did not
The
know
very
that.
first,
That's
yeah.
really recent
OG.
too, because that
Yeah.
was you were talking about 2017 whenever the other stuff happened. So yeah, that's really recent.
Yeah. It is.
I thought they had been around at least 10 years or so.
Mm-mm.
No?
Mm-mm. No, this was it's very, very recent. So 2018 was the very first. And so um that first year, I worked a regular job, and then I finally got a job working in recovery as like a detox tech. And then I went through this peer support training, and it was crazy because I'm fighting this federal case, but I'm getting the opportunity to walk into these spaces, that I never thought were going to be imaginable. Like, we're working with the Arkansas Drug Director's Office. I'm going back into Pulaski County, Lonoke County. This is whenever they started those pilot programs. Like, this is whenever Lonoke County, now I think you've interviewed Crystal Holland, but like
Yeah.
when that was still a pilot program and they didn't even know if it was going to work. Going there and helping Casey Copeland get that program started, and being able to speak to the inmates. And it was just, I just lived life. You know what I mean? Like it was crazy. Like I try not to focus on what was to come because I knew I was going to prison, but I just lived life. It was great.
Right. And
Yeah.
now you're doing a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually I went to prison. So I get sentenced.
Yeah.
I get sentenced to prison. And then I go, and I went pre-COVID. And so if you could just imagine that, it was pre-COVID. So prison wasn't as bad, at bad at first, and then COVID hit. And that was where the true test of every mental capacity that you have, whenever you're on lockdown, all of COVID. And there's just as much drugs in prison as there is on the streets, and they're drinking alcohol, and I was at a camp. And so like that stuff was readily available. But we actually started a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous inside the prison. We called it From the Inside Out. And that was like my sole focus was this meeting. And then I was in a program in prison called RDAP, which is like residential alcohol and drug treatment. And I did that program. I was in that program for like 18 months. And so try to be a good, you try to take what you know in recovery. And I was able to take that inside of prison, and that was crazy. That's a different dynamic whenever you're trying to live the same life in recovery inside of prison, but we did it. Yeah. And then I came home.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, because I know I've only know you, what, over a little over a year maybe.
Yeah.
Um, And so I know you as leading several different organizations. You were with Natural State, I think the first time you were interviewed on
Hmm.
Jimmy's podcast, I
Yeah.
believe. And then moved over to the National Peer Recovery Association,
Yeah.
um, where you're doing a lot of things and rising through the ranks there as well. You also do a lot of stuff with the bless what was it?
The blameless children.
Blameless Children.
So yeah,
Yes.
so I come home and like you said, I got orchard outpatient clinical treatment for like 2.5 years with natural state. And then once again, here comes Jimmy and he's like, hey, I'll put this application in. And I'm like, where, Jimmy? And then he's like, do you trust me? I'm like, why do we always seem to be having this conversation if I trust you? But obviously I trust him because what he says I've done.
Right.
And he's like, it's with the Archway Institute. And I'm like, what is that? I have no idea what that is. And he's like, just trust me. Put this application in. It's for the event coordinator. And so I put this application in with the Archway Institute and with the National Peer Recovery Alliance.
Yeah.
And yeah, life has been crazy. So I do that. I work with them. We formulate conferences, and basically what we do at the Archway Institute is we raise money to give it away. And that looks like over $100,000 we've released in recovery housing scholarships and small grants to recovery community organizations across the nation. And I sit on the board of directors with the Blameless Children. I also sit on the board for something called the Heels Cab, which we work on reform policy and stuff for justice involved women's health care.
Oh, well,
Yeah, we get to do all the things.
you do all the
Yeah,
things.
I do.
But you get a lot of trips you've taken this year alone.
Yeah.
For getting to speak on a lot of different places in
Yeah.
Kentucky, and then you went to what was it,
New
New
York.
York? Yeah,
Hmm.
that's awesome. I haven't been yet. I'm so.
You've never been to New York?
I go to Brooklyn in February for the Ambies,
Yeah.
but yeah,
It's great.
I can't wait.
Take the subway.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like a pro. Like I swear, like I belong, my heart belongs in the city. New York was a great experience. So Skip, she started the Justice Peer Initiative of New York City. I got the opportunity to speak at that conference.
Nice.
Yeah. And New York is a wonderful experience. Yeah, I get to go all the cool places. So
Yeah.
I've been, let's see. I've been to Missouri, Florida a couple times, Kentucky a couple times, New York. I leave this weekend to go to Ohio for
Nice.
NAR. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
for you. You get to do all this traveling and stuff. Yeah, and
Yeah.
kind of a quick rise to you don't like fame, but like your rise to fame because like people know who Marybeth Hill is in your recovery circles.
Yeah, but but this is the one thing I want to always say. Like, I'm just me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm literally,
Well, I get it, but it's also your humbleness, which is appealing to people. And why
yeah,
I'm like, oh,
for real. Like, I get people that tell me that all the time. If they look up to me, and I'm like, don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, just please don't do that. But like, don't ever put me on a pedestal to think that I'm somebody that I'm not. Because I am a fallible person. I make lots of mistakes every single day. I can be a horrible mother. So I'm not horrible, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm still navigating motherhood. That's
right.
still something that's new to, I mean, I don't think anybody ever masters motherhood anyways. Like, I think that's always,
Sure.
that's just a process. You know what I mean? But yeah, I just try to live my life the best that I know how,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and spread the message along the way. Yeah.
Which a lot of great things have come out of that. And I know you dropped your kids off at school today.
Yeah.
Do you have contact with all three of your kids now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the relationship with my daughter is one that I'm still really mending. Like
Yeah.
the boys is different. My little baby, he does not know me as an addict. Now he does remember when I went to prison, that was traumatizing and stuff for him. But the relationship with my daughter is one that we are working on that every single day. But man, I am that mom. Like, I'm a sports mom. And
Yeah.
so like they bowl, they do soccer, they do all these things. And they know me at the fields and at
Yeah.
the bowling alley, not because I'm loud and I am proud. Like, you don't
You're
look at
screaming. That's so bad.
yes, that's for real. Like, when my kid, he's like, whenever he was bowling high school, we could travel all over the state. He's graduated now, so I know your pains about having a kid who's grown.
Yeah.
But we would travel all over the state, and they knew me as that's my baby mom. They're like, "Hey, that's my baby mom." You know what I mean? I'm like, "Yeah, that's me.
Funny.
That's me."
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Well, it
Yeah.
seems like it's going pretty well. I mean, like I've seen you posted a few videos where you're torturing your daughter with music that you like to listen to
I
in the
love
car.
it.
Yeah.
I love it.
But she's like, rolling her eyes, like looking at the phone and all that stuff. She still calls you mom.
Yeah.
So that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't absolutely hate this.
No, she loves
She's
me.
that's good.
I just love to aggravate her.
Yeah, for sure. It's your role,
Yeah, yeah, you
especially
have
with at that
kids.
age.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to aggravate them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Unspoken rule.
Yeah. So, I know, like you've come a long way, and like you've seen even like peer recovery, become a thing, and then has been it's just exploded, and then of course, the opioid funds that came in through ARORP and
Yeah.
so all the different things. So there's lots that's going on right now where there are lots of different recovery organizations that are opening up, lots of different resources that weren't available just a few years ago,
Yeah.
and they're spread across, and like you're getting to see nationally what is this community of recovery look like compared to this. I mean, you went to New York
Yeah.
and you saw, I'm sure it's a lot different than it is in
Oh, yeah,
Arkansas,
it
which
is.
is a lot different than Kentucky, which is a lot different than Missouri or any other places you're going. I'm sure when you go to Ohio, is it
Yeah.
Ohio is going to be a little different. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's good to see that there's a culture that's built up, around these different places, and that you get a little bit of sample from all these different locations of like how are they doing it and what are they doing different from the other places? What's
Absolutely.
working and what's not? You know what I mean? What have they
Mhm.
found, yeah, that I could,
That's the one thing I love about my job is I love going into these different spaces and just seeing like what can we bring back to here because this is like Arkansas. Let's be realistic. We are behind a lot of things. You know
sure.
what I mean? And it's just because we're rural. It's a lot. It's a rural community.
Right.
You think about like going to New York City. Hell, the state of Arkansas could fill up the city of New York alone like 5 times. You know what I mean? And just that's just the city. But also we are also doing a lot of things right in Arkansas,
Sure.
as far as peer recovery goes. We are actually taking the Arkansas model as far as what peer recovery looks like in Arkansas and taking it to different states so that they can model after it.
Right.
So, hands up to Arkansas for that because, we really got it pinned down, as far as what it should look like, and what the standards should be set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, the state, working in all the different things that I do with AV, I mean, video photography and all that stuff, like Arkansas is way behind on technology.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think it just always will be. I think this is always going to be a state that's really, really far behind everybody else in the country. But so there's a weakness there. But I think the strength is that they do depend on more of the in person sort of,
Right.
conversations and meetings, which are more conversational, more community based for
Definitely.
areas,
Yeah.
and so there are other states that depend more on technology for recovery. I've talked to several different, rehabs in like California, Los Angeles, and so in New Jersey, different places where they are using apps rather than,
Yeah. They're app
person.
heavy. They're app heavy and AI heavy in a
Yeah,
lot of
and
places,
that's
which
not
is
a
so
problem that
weird.
I think that you can solve with an app. Like you've gotta have the human connection of somebody else that's a therapist. Like, hey, I've been at
Yeah.
where you're at, and
That
like
there's one thing that we
connection.
say in recovery, it's the therapeutic value of one addict helping another addict
Sure.
is without parallel, and that's the truth, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we can grow. That's the one thing about Arkansas that I do love because our recovery community in the reentry community space is so tight knit,
Yeah.
that you don't get that feel in a lot of those bigger places.
Right.
Um, I like what we have going on here. Do we have room for improvement? Always.
Yeah.
There's always room for improvement. But as far as what we have built as a base, and the fact that we recover out loud and proud in Arkansas, it makes me happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like more and more events. Well, you've got one coming up. I
Yeah.
guess we'll plug that in a minute.
Yeah.
But more and more events are popping up where it is, that recover out loud part that you just talked about, where there's still the stigma, right? The stigma still exists. But it is, I think, far less than what it used to be just a few years ago, where, even parents of people, parents of kids that were addicted to some sort of substance were even embarrassed to talk about it in social
Yeah.
circles. You know what I mean? And bridge the gap is a thing.
Right.
People that have lost people to some sort of substance use or fentanyl, all getting together and mourning, but also celebrating the lives and trying to prevent other people from losing to people. That's powerful. There are so many events that are just purely about recovery, or just people in recovery getting together and
Yeah.
having these events where they talk and they encourage each other and they hear from other people who have been successful. Like that's huge. Like it is a huge movement that is really moving through here. Um, but yeah, there's several coming up even this month. But yeah, your race that's coming up.
Yeah. So September is Recovery Month. It's National Recovery Month. The Archway Institute loves to do these mini fundraisers all across the United States. And so the one that I'm doing here in Arkansas is so Natural State Recovery Centers will always, those
Yeah.
always have a piece of my heart like that. No matter where I'm at or what I'm doing in life, they have supported me 1,000% along the way, and they are letting me have a 5K color run at their facility, their Oak Grove facility. So if you've ever been out to the fireworks that are at Natural State that we have every year, it's out there at their track. But it's a 5K color run. And so don't think that this is something where you have to come out and like know how to run. No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
We are going to have fun. We're going to listen to music. We're going to throw colors on you as you're going by. It's just really a space for community and to fellowship and, to do something different because we don't see a lot of those here in Arkansas. That's going to be on September the 20th at Natural State. I'll send you the link, Ty, and you can plug it in on the thing so they can register. But you don't even have to register. If you just show up, it's $20 registration. All the money that we raise at this event goes into the Marybeth Hill Hope Fund, which is a hope fund that I created in my name. I raise money for it, and it literally 100% of the money I raise goes right back out into our communities in the forms of recovery housing scholarships and small grants to recovery community organizations. So we raise money to give it away.
Awesome.
Yeah, excited about that.
Hey, open to anybody, by the way, not just people in recovery.
Yeah.
Or
Anybody.
affected by. And one of the things about the events, I hope to see more people that, whether they think they have any kind of connection to, substance use or
Right.
recovery, addiction, whatever, or not, just to go and experience these events alone. 'Cause I always feel like an outsider at first.
Yeah.
I remember going to these, like the state peer conference that
Mhm.
just happens. Like I go to the first night, which is like the ice cream social night, where everybody's just like,
Yeah.
and everybody's there and talking about their stories and exchanging things and what they've learned along the way. And I'm like, I'm such an outsider, but like it's so cool to like get to observe and to be part of it and to understand that world rather than have it told to you or explained to you through TV or movies, which
For sure.
isn't inaccurate. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
I want to see more people that are just curious about it because whether you know it or not, this is beneficial for you
Oh, yeah.
as a human being. If these people are going through recovery and now they've got a new outlook on life and they're pursuing new things, I mean, like you, right? So you are the complete opposite. You don't have a motorcycle in your kitchen right now, or have they, right? Okay. Okay. So
No more.
you're not having to prepare
Yeah.
to
No great
shoot your
escapes.
spouse. So
Yeah,
yeah, right.
yeah.
There's this. Yeah, exactly right. Traveling with the baby and drugs in the cars and stuff like that. Like you're the complete opposite of that. And so for that to have happened, you went through recovery, and that's how beneficial it is for just a general person in the community.
Yeah.
Whenever somebody like you goes through recovery and becomes the person that you are now, and then you're helping more people, you're spreading that out. I mean, you're traveling the country and helping give some sort of message. I mean, that's why we're here right now, right? We're talking about your story to try to inspire somebody to change their life or to educate the general public. But it's beneficial for absolutely anybody, no matter where you live. This stuff does not discriminate against, location or race or color.
I think that's the most important key component, what you just said right there. Addiction does not discriminate, all right? Like it does not care about your social class. It doesn't care about where you are in this economic standard. It doesn't care if you have millions of dollars or if you have zero. Addiction affects everybody. And I promise you, like I spoke at a women's luncheon not too long ago, and it was nothing to even do with addiction, but it was just about influential women in our communities.
Yeah.
And how many of those women, you're talking about a room full of doctors, lawyers, business owners, all over the spectrum who it would come up to me and say, thank you for telling your story because my sister or my son or my brother, I promise you, it doesn't matter where you're from, addiction has impacted your life in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I would say throw a rock, you're gonna hit somebody affected by addiction at some point.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, especially here. But no, like you said, it doesn't stop at borders, and like it crosses over into whatever economic field you may be in. I mean, there are of course the small town cabin people that have nothing to do, and then they fall into meth addiction. But then there's also the soccer moms with the quote unquote perfect life, picket fences and everything, and then get addicted to pain pills.
Right.
There are, doctors that take their own prescriptions. I've talked to them. I've seen attorneys here that will go into the bathroom and go do a line of coke off of the hotel in the Capitol Hotel. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean? So, um, yeah, it doesn't discriminate, and it's everywhere. So yeah, the more people we have like you, the better off we are. And so that's what you're doing, is trying to create other people to
For sure.
be their own selves and
Yeah.
rise up. And it's just amazing. So, um, okay, well, where else? I mean, because like you have a lot of different things that you do. Um, what is your main like future outlet for Marybeth Hill? What are future plans?
So should we tell them what we've been talking about doing, Ty?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you want to do this,
Yeah, we can do this.
let's go for it.
So, this is the one thing that I talk about it a lot. And, we touched on it in the very beginning of this podcast, is that we want to make this space more diverse, something that is meant for everybody. And so, very soon, you will be hearing me on my own podcast called
Yeah.
Breaking Quiet. Is going to be specifically for women in reentry and recovery, to give us a space for our voices to be heard too. So be looking out for that.
Absolutely. I'm so excited about it. This is
Yeah.
something I had in my mind for a long time. Where do we take long term? Because it can't just be, I think, the look that we have, our perspective is kind of different because a lot of the shows that I have seen that were out there already were people that were hosted by people that were in recovery and they were
Yeah.
just talking to other friends and stuff. And so, for long term, started this as somebody that has not gone through recovery or had substance abuse, addiction or anything like that,
Right.
to try to learn from firsthand from people like yourself. But I know that to expand that voice, now that we have the captured audience,
Yeah.
we need more voices and original voices that haven't told their stories 1,000 times. And then I
Absolutely.
mean, or
Yeah.
the same old cliches, or like you have your same 12 sayings and you pull them out of the box as you need to. I
Yeah.
mean, no offense, Jimmy, but anyway, uh I mean, voices like yours, where you're going to be talking to so many people that also need to be heard, and those stories need to be told. And they don't normally, I think we had this conversation, there's lots of times whenever you go to these events where, yes, it's important to go to these events and to experience them,
Yeah.
yes. But you will see a lot of those same faces take the stage.
Yeah.
But there are literally thousands and thousands, not just in this state, but across the country, of people who have their own story to tell.
I think they say like there's like 2 million people that are in recovery or something like that across the United
I
States.
believe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, those stories are going to affect someone else differently than the
Absolutely.
same stories we've heard before, right? And so, yeah, I'm really excited to see what you do with that.
I'm excited.
Help you along the way with the podcasting side. And yeah, so if you are, on YouTube watching this, then it'll still be on this channel. So you're already subscribed. Subscribe if you haven't already. And
Subscribe.
subscribe. But yeah, Marybeth will have Breaking Quiet will have its own podcast feed on the audio side, and so we'll let you guys know that and give out the links whenever that's. I'm sure we'll have a big release and a trailer and everything for you whenever
Yeah.
we're ready for that. So
I'm excited.
I am too. Okay, Marybeth. So I gotta ask you, just like I asked everybody else.
Okay.
So with all of your experience, both personal, professional, I mean, you've made a career out of helping other people, and you've gone and seen so many different sides of recovery and what it looks like in all those different communities we were just talking about across the country, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, taking ideas from other places, bringing them in. What is your one long-term solution for people in recovery?
It's the power of peer support. I can't rep that enough. We have to continue recovering out loud. That is the only way, that we're going to continuously break down those barriers and the stigma that's surrounded by recovery and reentry. I went somewhere not too long ago, Ty, and it was at a fellowship function, and he asked me, he's like, "Are you one of us?" I'm like he wanted to know if I was an addict, and I was like, "Do I not look like an addict?" He was like, "Absolutely not," and I was like, that is the power of recovery. You know what I mean? It's just like to keep being the voice, for people who are just like me. We as a community have got to stop with the stigma and the shame and the guilt and stop allowing that, and for us to have a voice and to speak out about it. If we can continue to keep sharing our stories, no matter which way it goes, if it's on, the overdose side, the recovery side, the reentry side, The more times that we speak about it, the less power that we give to it. And, we can continue to help people, who's to say that this interview might reach somebody that, they just hear those one things and they're too ashamed to say, I'm a mom and I'm an addict. But because of my transparency, that was, something that gave them that motivating factor to be like, hey, I need to do something different.
Yeah.
We don't realize, the power of our voices. So, and when I say peer support, I don't just mean it as a profession, right? I mean like that peer to peer interaction, continuing to have these conversations that are hard, to continue to just keep speaking out about it, to help save a generation because that's what we're doing. We're losing a generation and the only way that we're going to be able to save it is by, to keep speaking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because let's be realistic, the drugs and all that is not going anywhere, right? It's never going to go anywhere.
No.
And the only way that we're going to be able to fight this is by continuing to be a voice, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, we talked a little bit about, well, where's the meth coming from now,
Yeah.
right? And so like they busted all
The
the
borders.
right.
Yeah.
So it was homemade, and then they busted the people that were doing the homemade, and so they were like, well, this is an opportunity for us to bring it over the border, and if we stop that, guess what? It's going back to homemade again.
Yeah.
And so it's not a cut off. It's a hydra, right? You cut off
Right.
one head, too far grow back, and so what you're doing is preventing those sort of the regrowth of those, and like the desire for those things
Yeah.
has to come from before they take the first time, right?
And let me give a shameless plug too. So the National Peer Recovery Alliance and the Archway Institute is working with the Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership right now,
Right.
to formulate a prevention training. And so you heard me talk about that before, but like that's one of the key components is prevention. Like if we can get to it before it becomes a thing. So we are actually formulating a prevention training right now that's going to put a preventionist peer in the high schools and in the schools, in the school systems in the state of Arkansas. They had a pilot program that was really successful. And so, my hopes is that after we formulate this training and we launch this training, that there will be a preventionist specialist in each high school, somebody with lived experience who is there to be that sounding board for those kids who like I needed, whenever I was a kid. So, prevention is another thing too. It's key. We've got to get to them whenever it's starting. It's good to get it. I love reentry and I love recovery, but why not try to get there before it happens? At least plant the seed.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a three-pronged approach where we have to, in
Mhm.
order to get this at the time where it's prevention, intervention, and justice.
Definitely.
Um, and yeah, there's a lot that's a simplified version. It was a really complicated matter,
Yeah.
just getting into recovery and providing those services and letting people know that those are, resources are even available to them. Um,
Yeah, another shameless plug.
yeah, go for it.
The Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership has a app called Revive AR. If you are somebody in this community, and let's just be realistic, a lot of times we don't know whenever we have a loved one, if it's ourselves, we don't know where to go to find those resources. Download the app Revive AR. It literally links you into all the resources in the state of Arkansas, whether it's for Narcan, whether it's for Narcan trainings, if you're trying to get Narcan for your organization, if you're looking for treatment, if you're looking for anything peer related, it links you all in that one app. So download that app. That app can save a life for sure.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay, very bad. So I know, besides subscribing to this channel and where they can find you in the future for Breaking Quiet, where else can people find you?
Oh, listen. So I'm all over social media. I have a TikTok. I've got Instagram. They can find me on Facebook, the Archway Institute website, the Blameless Children website. Type in my name, Marybeth Hill, and it'll bring up all the things that you can
Oh,
find
good.
me
Yeah,
at.
you quartered that SEO for Marybeth Hill.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, literally. So, like, you just type in my name and all the things pop up, good and bad.
Awesome. It's incredible. Well, thank you so much for being willing to share your story, and also for, lifting up the voices of others, and I mean, everything you do in recovery. It's really exciting to see what you're going to do with your course, your speaking career, but also your show. I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm
and
excited.
I'm excited to see what happens with the podcast and getting those episodes out and sharing those stories and listening to those people who have, had their own experience in
Right.
recovery, how they came to it, because
Yeah.
maybe they didn't have federal charges
Right.
and be offered this,
My
program
story's a little
forever.
extreme. You know what I mean?
Right, but so there's so many out there. You
Yeah.
said 2 million in recovery. I
Right.
mean, there are going to be some extreme stories, and there are going to
Amen.
be some subtle ones. And so it's like we said in the very beginning, this is not a one size fits all sort of thing. And so I think learning from as many people about such diverse ways that they came into the recovery as
Absolutely.
possible is going to give us an overall view of like how does this thing work? You know, how does recovery work? And what all kinds of different types of services need to be available to people and
Absolutely.
to be catered to the individual rather than trying to make a blanket that covers everyone.
Yeah.
So I think it's the best approach. But thank you for joining us for this podcast. And if you were watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. That's been like the 50th time I said it, but I can't stress it enough. Subscribe to this. And if you're listening on the audio podcast platforms, you can find us on YouTube. Just search for long term podcast and recovery. We should pop up there. And if you are on YouTube, vice versa, we're on all the podcast platforms from Apple, iHearts to Spotify and Amazon Music. If you heard Mary Beth say something here, which I'm sure you did, and you thought about somebody in your life or somebody that you know that would benefit from hearing the story or something that she said here, maybe you know somebody that's actively in addiction now, or maybe you know somebody that is a counselor that who helps people that are in addiction or has talked about a different type of approach that they don't know how to take, helping somebody come out of their addiction and go into recovery, share this episode with them. The worst that can happen is that they won't listen to it. The best thing that can happen is that it saves a life. And
Yeah.
so that's the quickest way to grow this message, to help us grow this platform and the podcast, and to get this message to as many people as possible. As you said, 2 million people in recovery. There's a lot more people that aren't even in recovery, and they don't know that recovery is available to them or even an option. And they only see the options that are in front of them, and they're not good. So we need to make sure that they know these are options for you. There is a way out. Other people have been in your exact same position, and this is how you do it. This is how they've done it. There are people, there are peer support specialists that are here that can actually help you walk along that line to mentor you and to just to escort you through that whole process of recovery and beyond. So share this episode, and we will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. And close.
I had to pee so
Okay.
bad. Where's the bathroom?
Uh, Around the corner. So yes, I'll turn left here and go around those offices with the left. Okay. Well, it turned out really good. I'm an hour. 4 4.